Welcome to Fantasy or Reality, the GPP. Whatever road you took to get here doesn't matter. What matters is you're here. My hope is that we all can help one another in this journey. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. It's your lovely host, Steve, again. So, let's see, what are we going to dive into here? So, I was reflecting a lot recently on a great weekend that my family and I have had together. I'll get further into it as I go along. I've been really reflecting on the good things in life, the real wins of life. So I'm sure if you clicked on this episode, you saw it's going to be something like, Draftkings Fanduel versus real life wins. So to me, real life wins are, the things in life that really mean something to us. Spending quality time with family, with your children, with your significant other. Good things that happen in your life that don't result from this artificial thing that I've had a problem with gambling or whatever addiction you've had. Like I've spoke about, I've had several addictions in my life. But with the gambling, it's the wins were obviously, that was the high. That was the chasing of the win. So, with DraftKings and FanDuel, my big thing obviously was daily fantasy sports. If you've listened to this, this podcast, and you know that. But if you don't, this is your first episode or whatever. I was a daily fantasy sports gambler. I was always chasing that big win. I always wanted to win that top prize. For DraftKings and the GPPs that I would play, the top prize was typically $100,000 in the basketball, or if you played football, it was $1 million. I never really came close in that. Basketball is what I always came very close to. So I'm always chasing the wins. At first, when I started, I was just trying to get money to either keep us, on Long Island, or, trying to win some money to improve my life with my family, trying to feel better about myself. If you've listened to this podcast, you know a lot of this stuff. So I won't dive too deep into that, but I'll go into, the wins that I was chasing with FanDuel and with DraftKings. So if you know anything about DraftKings or FanDuel, it's daily fantasy sports. You're building lineups. You're given a salary cap. So, for example, basketball was my big thing. I would typically go in and do the GPPs. Sometimes I do the head-to-heads. Sometimes I would do the 10-person contest, whatever, doesn't matter. But a lot of what I did was the GPPs, the large contest, because that's where the big prizes were. So you go in, you build a lineup. So, for example, let's say LeBron James, he would be one of the higher priced guys. You go in with DraftKings, it was I believe $50,000. So you'd have a $50,000 lineup or a salary cap you have to build your lineup with. So you'd have to make this balanced lineup. You could pick one or two guys like LeBron or Russell Westbrook, and then you'd have to build the balanced lineup. So whatever. So I'd spend my time, depending on how much money I would have, I'd be building my lineups, setting them, and then praying for that win. Watching as, I would either be placing in the bottom. Sometimes I'd be really close to the top. So there was a lot of stress and anxiety. I very rarely actually watched the games. Most of the time I would either set it and not look at it to not feel the stress and anxiety, and just either look in the morning or look later. But if I did pay attention, I was watching it on ESPN, kind of play-by-play. So there was a ton of stress and anxiety, especially if I was actually in those higher places. So say I was in the top 100. If you know anything about daily fantasy sports, it shows what you're winning at the time during the contest. So say the last game of the slate is going, I'm in the top 100. I got one guy going left. He's got one half left. I'm rising up the charts. getting pretty high. There were sometimes I would place in the top 10 or even the top five. Um, but the stress and anxiety of watching that go up and down, and sometimes seeing your name up in that first place slot, just praying that no one passes you. And every time I would get passed, sometimes I would place in the top five and win 5 6 grand, whatever it was. Um, but chasing those wins, the extreme highs and lows of winning, and sometimes even and the lows of sorry. So yeah, the extreme highs and lows of winning or losing. So that's the stress that we go through as a gambler. You have those really high highs when you're placing really high like that, or you think you're going to place, and the really low lows, just like a drug addiction. So like when I would use, for example, heroin, I'd shoot the heroin, I'd feel phenomenal. But then when I'd be out and I'd be coming down, I'd be going through these horrendous withdrawals. If I couldn't find any more, or I ran out or whatever, I couldn't get a hold of my dealer, I'd feel horrible. The extreme highs and lows. It's really the same in any addiction. But with this, it's all about the money. That's the drug or whatever. That's the addiction with this. So, um, even if I would win, if it wasn't, especially towards the end, like in the beginning, I could win a couple $100 and be excited. Towards the end, if I didn't win $1,000 or more, it was it was almost like a loss to me. Like you could still place, but if you're not placing high enough, that's not the goal. At least for me, as an addicted gambler, I always was shooting for that top prize, or shooting for something that I had deemed, as enough money, or I told myself was enough money. Um, I was always trying to chase this money to feel better about who I was. I told myself it was just to improve my family's life. We needed this money for one thing or another. I felt like even though I was working a crazy amount of hours and making over $100,000 a year, that just wasn't enough. We needed this large shot of money to make our life better. But really, I mean, that was part of it, but a big part of it too is me not feeling good enough about who I was, not loving who I was, not caring. Not that I didn't care, but I didn't feel like I wasn't, good enough. I wasn't, almost like I wasn't worthy of my family. I know I've discussed a lot of this before, but I was almost chasing that win, feeling like if I could come home or show this $100,000 prize or more, that I'd finally feel like I was worthy of my family, worthy of my life, that I was enough of a person. But upon reflection and recovery, you realize that no amount of money would have been enough. Because as an addicted gambler, you're going to give it all back. It didn't matter if I won 1,000, 5,000, had built it up to more than that. I still would lose it all. I would still tell myself that wasn't enough. So another thing I was speaking to my wife about was how today was, I could have 5,000, 8,000, whatever it was in my DraftKings account at the time. I could look at that number on the screen. I could see physically there was, whatever amount, thousands of dollars in there. And it almost didn't register, like I knew that was money in there. But I mean, I could look at my bank account and see a few grand in there, and then literally switch over to DraftKings and see, twice as much as was in our savings account. And, for me, at least what I was telling myself was I wasn't playing for this few $1,000s to throw in our savings account. I was playing to try to be this big shot, come home with this large amount of money. But, upon reflection and upon being in this program or in recovery or whatever, I realized that no amount of money would have been enough. If I'd won that $100,000 prize, I would have told myself I needed 200 or whatever amount to pay off the house. If I won that, it just would have kept going. I don't think any amount would have ever been enough. I can't say that for certain, but that's, when I first started playing, $5,000, that would have been enough. Towards the end, that was not even close to enough. I needed 100,000. I needed 200,000. I needed to pay my house off. I needed to be this big shot. So the ups and downs, um, I'm sure if any of you have played for any amount of time, you know how that is. DraftKings, FanDuel, it shows you what you're winning at that time period. Um, so it varies so much, the highs and lows. But anyways, back to the amount of money in the accounts. I still don't fully understand how I was able to look at the numbers in my DraftKings account or whatever and not, I don't want to say make the connection, but something about it being on screen, something about it. It could just be the color setup. I don't know. I know they put a lot of psychology behind these sites or whatever. Just, it's real money, but it's really weird, man. Like, or whatever. Like, I just didn't fully comprehend that was real money in there. Um, it just almost felt like more ammunition to keep playing. But anyways, I want to contrast that with real life wins. So, like I said, I've been reflecting a lot on the good things in life that have come from my recovery and have come from me working on myself and really advancing, you know, my outlook on life and who I am as a person, and really slowing down and beginning to enjoy the little moments in life. Like I spoke about in previous episodes on other podcasts, whatever, I can now, I'm not rushing through life anymore. I'm not rushing through my day at work. A short day at work for me is 12 hours. I'd always want to rush through that to get done, get home. Then I'd be wanting to rush the kids to bed. And then before I know it, the night is over. And then I haven't enjoyed one moment of the day. Now I can enjoy music driving to work. I can enjoy my podcast or listening to other podcasts or listening to music as I'm working. I can enjoy the scenery as I go along. I try to enjoy every moment in life. Um, so a real life win for me, not winning 5,000, 10,000, whatever. It's not money. The money doesn't matter. The money is not what matters in life. What matters is the connection. At least that's how I feel. So this past weekend, my wife and I took our kids to several places. We went to a place called Winter Wonderland around us. It's really cool. They set up an ice maze for the kids to go through. A lot of gingerbread houses, characters. It was really cool. They sat with Mrs. Claus and took some pictures. Sat with Santa, took some pictures. Um, they were able to take a train ride. They went on a carousel. They're playing in some fake snow. Um, we got them some uh, the balloons that you get at like kids parties or whatever. So my son got a cat, and my older son got a cat, and my younger son got a sword. So and then after that, we went over to this section where there was a large fake tree and a lot of like this fake snow on the ground, and we were running around and playing and throwing fake snow at each other, and just really being able to not sit down obviously, but you know being present, enjoying those times, enjoying those moments with your family, with my family. Then after that, we went down to a park in Albany, New York, and every year they set it up so it's almost like a two and a half. It was a 2.5 mile walk where it's just a bunch of lights set up in different. It looks like Moby Dick. It looks like Gingerbread Man jumping across the street. It's so elaborate. It's so great. We went down there. We parked. It was like the one night this year where normally you drive through it, but it was the one night it ended up just working out where you park and you walk through it, and that ended up being so much better than driving through. Normally when we've driven through, we get the kids some donuts, we're driving through, it takes 10, 15 minutes, and you're done. They get bored, whatever. So instead, we park the car, we walk through the park, we can take our time. I'm watching my kids run through, playing together. Normally, they're beating the hell out of each other. Um, it's really fun watching them run around together and play, looking at all the lights and pointing different things out, and just walking down, holding my wife's hand, just being able to enjoy every moment, which is something I could not do when I was gambling. Like I said, while playing Draftkings and Fanduel, as the contests were going, I felt nothing but stress and anxiety. Um, Whereas with this, I really was able to enjoy each moment with my family, uh, and really reflecting on how fortunate I am to not only still have them after everything that's gone on, but also realizing that even though I've made the mistakes I've made, I, I am worthy of that. I am worthy of the love. I'm worthy of being a father. Aside from these poor choices, I'm actually a really good father, a really good husband. And now I can actually see that. Other people have been able to see it and have told me that for years. But now I can finally see that. I can really see that I'm I'm a good person. I really love who I am today. I don't mean that in any, oh, look at me, I'm so great. I'm just trying to express these things because I know in the beginning of recovery, I never thought I could feel like this. I never thought I could get here. And through self reflection, through therapy, through a lot of hard work, through my recovery, I've gotten to this place. Um, anyways, after we did the lights in the park, we went, had dinner at the Olive Garden, and it's just fun sitting down with the kids and my wife. And it was just a really, really wonderful night that, if this had happened last year while I was gambling, there's no way I would have been able to enjoy it like this. There's no way I'd be able to have the fun. I could still obviously be present and have fun, but I probably would have either have had contests going or been stressing about whatever money I'd lost or how I was going to get money to play again, and I don't have to worry about any of that anymore. Um, anyways, and then the Sunday, I really had a great time also with my older son Luke. I take him to our local YMCA or Y, um, and we go and work out together. And it's a really great time. We bond together. It's a special one-on-one time that Luke and I have together. He's my 7-year-old. We've been going for a few months now together, and when he first went, or when we first went together, he could, I'd have him say, just for example, on the bench press, we both hit these little milestones that were really, really great. And I felt really proud for both of us. Great moment. So, when he first started using the bench press or whatever, the bar is 45 pounds. He would get down, I'd have to help him lift it up every time. He couldn't push it up one time. But through going with me every week and working out, he now is able to take that 45-pound bar, push it up 10 times on his own, which was incredible. Just seeing that he's actually coming with me every week. He's working, he's actually getting stronger. And when he was able to do that on his own, he popped up. He had this huge smile on his face. I'm giving him a high five. I'm really telling him how proud I am of him. He's really excited. Then now it's my turn. I get down. When I first started back up doing this, I've always worked out. Not always, but a big part of my life has been fitness, especially in my younger days. Um, but I started really working out again back in July. It's December now. So when I started, I could maybe bench press 155 pounds. And I worked up to the highest weight I've been able to do since I was probably 23 years old. And I was able to bench press 245 pounds a couple of times. And that felt great. I felt really proud of myself for hitting that mark, for hitting that accomplishment. High fiving my son again. And it's always great going with him. I really enjoy going there with him. But these are moments that I'm proud of him. I'm proud of myself, and I can enjoy these moments now. This is a real life win. This to me is more important than if I had won that $100,000 prize. I felt better this weekend about going with my family and spending time together without any worries in the world, going to the gym with my son, than no matter how much money I'd won. This is a real life win. This wins over DraftKings and FanDuel any day. Another moment that I was able to sit and reflect on is so many times we're rushing the kids to bed, or what, life just gets busy. If you're a parent, you understand what I'm talking about. But you also realize that, my kids, they're 7 and 4 years old, and they're only going to be this way for a short period of time. And sometimes it's hard to slow down and realize. And I'm not perfect. I don't, I get frustrated sometimes, and I'm not always um, cognizant of that fact. I guess that, these moments at 7 and 4 are fleeting, and they'll be gone before you know it. But so my younger son Shane he's 4. So I typically will give him his shower, his bath, whatever. When he gets out, he gets wrapped up in his towel, and before he gets we get him dressed or whatever, and he's all wrapped up, he wants to sit on my lap and cuddle his head into my shoulder. And you know in the past or whatever, or normally, I'd, be like, okay, give him a hug. That's cute. 10 seconds. All right, buddy, let's get dressed. But this is this weekend after we had the great time on Saturday. Luke and I had a great time at the gym. So when I had him on my lap, I was able to really hug him and hold him and just really appreciate that moment that he just, he's such a little love. He just wants to hug you. He wants to, you know, he's 4. He's still got the cute voice. And I just really appreciated the fact that I get to be there. I get to be his father. I get to be present. I get to enjoy these moments because I know it's not going to last forever. When they're teenagers, when they're older, these moments are going to be gone and they're just going to be memories. So now I try, like I said, I'm not perfect, but I try when these moments happen to really soak them up, to really enjoy the love, the time with your family. That's what matters more than anything. That's a real life win. And the last thing I want to talk about is, just honestly, it just happened maybe an hour before doing this podcast. Um, I was talking to my wife Kelly about the topics that I was going to speak about tonight, and I was able to just talk openly about the topic, the stress I used to feel, the amounts of money winning and losing or whatever, like stuff that used to, I would never feel comfortable talking about. Now, because of recovery, because of all this, I'm able to talk about it openly and freely, and I don't judge myself anymore. And I feel no judgment from her. We're just talking about it. She was just honestly asking questions because she was curious about some of the habits or whatever I was doing when I was playing, and was able to talk about them without feeling that shame. And I was able to reflect on that and realize that that is a win. Being able to talk openly and freely about my addictions, about this addiction, this gambling addiction, DraftKings, FanDuel, daily fantasy sports, without feeling the shame, the loathing, the self hatred I used to have. And it feels good to be able to talk openly about something that really was difficult for me to ever, talk about to anyone. And you'd think you'd be able to talk to your wife about anything. Well, this stuff I could hardly even talk to myself about, you know. Um, so, anyways, that's that's basically it. I just wanted to compare the the wins and losses that occurred when I would play DraftKings and FanDuel versus the real life wins, what really matters, you know. So DraftKings, FanDuel, they have these head-to-head matchups. That's one of the contests you can play. There's GPPs. There's those large scale contests, head to heads, and a few others. So in this head to head, real life wins. Thanks everyone for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Here's where to get help. You can call or text 1-800-522-4700. That's the National Council on Problem Gambling. Or you could call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-426-2537. This is where I found the link to my therapist through my local counselor. And then also, we cannot forget our affected others. My wife goes to Gam-Anon every week, and it's been a huge help to her. So anyone in your life who you feel like needs help or you've affected through your gambling, you can go to gamanon.org, GAM-ANON.org. The number is 718-352-1671.